True Love Chapter 11th of the book Betelnuts and Other Stories by Simeon G. Silverio Jr. Inday ng buhay ko, ikaw ay nasaan? Bigla kang nagtampo, ano ang dahilan? Tagling inulila ang puso kong nalulumbay, taghoy ko araw-araw ikaw inday larawan mo, inday, hinahagkan, kinakausap ko, luhay bumubukal. Saan ka ngayon? Ikaw ay matatagpuan. Kapag di ka nakita, ako'y mamamatay. Inday of my life, where are you? You suddenly left angry, what is the reason? You orphaned my heart, which is now saddened, my cry every day is you, Inday. Your picture, Inday. I keep kissing, I keep talking to it, my tears keep flowing, where can I find you? If I can't find you, I will surely die. This haunting melody about a lonely man searching for his lost love kept playing on a jukebox in an eatery on the corner of Platerias and P. Paterno streets in Quiapo that night during the summer of 1958. As he lay in bed in their apartment near the center of the street in Manila, Simeon could hear the sad, plaintive song play on repeatedly until late in the evening. He knew it was Narding who kept playing the record on the jukebox, drowning his sorrows till dawn for his lost love, Clarita, a prostitute in a brothel across the street from Simeon's house on Platerias Street. Narding was a driver in his mid-20s who lived with his mother and a younger brother and sister on the second floor of a building 2 houses away from the brothel. He was a quiet man who minded his own business, working during the day and part-time in the evenings. Whenever Simeon's family needed a substitute driver, they could always count on Narding to take the place. He was a hard worker, a good person. He would surely be a good husband and provider, a prized catch for any decent woman in town. The only problem was he fell in love not with a decent woman, but instead with Clarita, a tall, fair-skinned prostitute with a sad but beautiful face. Simeon would often see Clarita at 10 in the morning as he played the pinball machine in Mameng's corner eatery. Disheveled, weak, and wearing a loose dayster, house dress, Clarita would arrive as if she was ravished all night by a group of men. Still weary from a tiring night, she would barely make it to the stool beside the counter and would order a glass of sarsaparilla drink and 1 raw egg. She would break the egg and pour its contents in her drink, stir it with a teaspoon, and drink it straight. At that time, when salmonella was not yet a household name, it was thought to be a healthy drink that would restore one's energy. She would sit still for a while, catching a bit of rest before returning to the brothel to prepare for the day's work. If she were not a prostitute, Clarita would be a prized catch too. She was pretty, especially when dressed up, and was more beautiful than an average Filipina woman of her day. But fate brought her to the brothel, presumably along the route of an oft-repeated tragic story. She was a poor barrio girl who ventured to the big city to escape her impoverished childhood. Along the way, she met the vultures of the white slavery trade. She would find protesting was futile and eventually had to accept her fate, working robot-like as a prostitute. Women of her fate also lost hope and faith in God. They just let succeeding events dictate their course. The same went for Clarita until she met Narding, her knight in shining armor. It did not matter to him that dozens of men took her to bed at night and day, or that the woman he wanted to be the mother of his children suffered daily the most inhuman experiences anyone could imagine. Making love? No. Having sex? No. Giving her body to be abused by a stranger for money. For Narding, it was nothing else but true love. How else could one explain the behavior of a healthy, fairly good-looking bachelor choosing to cast his fate with a prostitute, with dozens of equally good-looking, decent women available? In the evening, Clarita and Narding would sit alongside on a raised concrete on the dark part of the street near the entryway to the brothel and weave their dreams for the future. Narding's image would blend into the evening, but the milky white face, arms, and legs of Clarita were clearly visible from afar. When a customer arrived, Clarita would stand up and go with him inside the brothel. Narding would be left alone, waiting until his loved one was done having sex with the paying stranger. One could not imagine how many customers would come and go during an evening, and how Narding's heart would be broken into pieces each time he saw his loved one taken to bed by another man. But Narding could not help but contend with his heartache, pain, and suffering each evening. He did not have the money to buy Clarita's freedom from the clutches of the sinister operators of the brothel, Slowly but surely, he was saving some money, but still had a long way to go. "Simeon, you go with Narding to take your aunties back home to the province," his mother told him. It was 7 in the evening. They just held an all-day anniversary celebration at their house. His 2 aunts, who lived in the province, came to help cook the food for the occasion. Now that the party was over, they needed to be brought back home. Since their regular driver, Riz, was not available, Narding was asked to take his place. Narding was hesitant at first, since it was a big night for him. Although he had not saved enough money, he had planned to take Clarita away an hour before midnight. A Chinese customer proposed to buy Clarita's freedom and take her as his mistress in the province. When Clarita found about the plans, he told Narding. Narding promised to pick her up at 11 that evening when their escape was least likely to be noticed. Those were peak hours at the brothel, when the guards would be busy attending to other things. Narding's mother, brother, and sister would have to follow them wherever they would settle and start a new life. It would take an hour to drive Simeon's aunts to Bulacan and another hour to return. At the very least, he could return by 9:30, with time to spare before his escape with Clarita by 11. He knew that by midnight the Chinese would come with the money and steal Clarita away for good. Narding did not take a chance. He drove the car as fast as he could so he could return early. Simeon and his 2 aunts kept telling him to slow down, but their requests fell on deaf ears. By 8 in the evening, they reached their destination. He and Simeon made their way back home. Perhaps as the result of the fast and reckless driving, they heard the sound of metal dragging on asphalt when they reached the midpoint of their return home in the Marilao town along MacArthur Highway. The car stopped on the dark side of the road. They got out and looked under the car. Using a small, flickering light from a cigarette lighter, they saw one end of the broken steering rod resting on the ground. It was only 8:30 in the evening, but Narding still panicked. He still had plenty of time to fix the car and return in time to save the love of his life from the demons of prostitution. But the stakes involved, his happiness for the rest of his life, were too high for him not to be worried. Together, Narding and Simeon walked along the highway towards the lights of the town. It took them 30 minutes to find a telephone and call Simeon's father for help. Simeon's dad had to dress up and take a taxi to go to the house of a mechanic. Since taxis could not go all the way to Bulacan, the mechanic drove his own car to reach Narding and Simeon. As they waited for help, Narding could not help but agonize over the delay. He would pace back and forth along the highway, walking towards the rice fields, and vent his frustrations on everything that came his way by kicking cans, throwing stones in the air, and shouting. Simeon sat quietly inside the car, worried that Narding was losing his mind. At around 9:30 in the evening, with no help in sight, Narding did the unthinkable. "I am sorry, Simeon," he told him. "Your parents will be mad at me forever, but I have to leave you because Clarita will be taken away from me." Simeon could not help but stare at him quietly. He was too scared to protest. Narding walked away from the car and tried to flag down every vehicle that passed by. Public transportation had ceased operating for the day. To get a ride, he was at the mercy of the private vehicles intermittently cruising the highway every few minutes. But no one would pick up a stranger in the dark of the night and expose himself to potential danger. Finally, Narding gave up and sunk on the side of the road. He was a sight of a broken man. When Simeon's father and the mechanic arrived, Narding was like a zombie. He would not talk to anybody. It took hours to fix the car, and once he was back in the driver's seat, Narding raced the car as if there were no tomorrow. He was like a man possessed. Refusing to heed the angry commands of Simeon's father, passing through red lights one after another. It did not matter that all their lives were in danger. By the time they reached Plateria Street, everything was quiet. There was hardly a soul in sight. It was 10 minutes past midnight. Narding frantically ran inside the brothel in search of Clarita, but he was told the Chinese took her just 10 minutes before. He ran outside towards P. Paterno Street. Finding no speeding taxi, he ran back towards Carrito Street, turned right towards Rizal Avenue, hoping the taxi holding Clarita had broken down. Finally, A loud, agonizing cry was heard all over in that quiet neighborhood of Quiapo. By the end of that summer in 1958, Simeon could still hear the haunting melody of the song being played over and over again every evening on a jukebox at Mameng's Eatery on the corner of P. Paterno and Platerius Streets. And that closes the book on this matter. Subscribe to this channel to listen to more enjoyable stories like this. This is episode 11th of the YouTube channel, Our Life and Times Stories. Betel Nuts and Other Stories is published by Papyrus Books with email address papyrusbooks@yahoo.com. To order a copy of the book, go to amazon.com and enter the name of the author, Simeon Silverio, in the browser.